Hello ladies and gentlemen and them and theys. In today's video we are tackling what I call the Killer Bootcamp Challenge with our boy the Trapper. What the challenge consists of is playing the same killer for 50 matches in a row, gathering a win and loss ratio. The reason why we gather a win and loss ratio is to see if the killer is balanced. The reason why we play 50 matches is to learn how to play as the said killer, and also how to go against them when we do play Survivor. What made me want to do this challenge is because I'm a Survivor main in Dead by Daylight with over 2,000 hours. I have a hard time playing as killer because it's 1 versus 4, not 4 versus 1 in a sense. So I wanted to create this little challenge for myself to play killer more. My goal with this video is to also mention what I've learned with the killer's power, what builds I would recommend from beginner to expert, and basically what changes I would make overall for the killer's power, if there is any. So let's go ahead and dive into my experience with the Trapper. All in all, Trapper was a pain to endure all the 50 matches. We ended with a 31 win and a 19 loss ratio. During these 50 matches, we did experiment with different builds that we believed best fit Trapper's power. I want to state this real quick before we go over these builds, that I do understand that everyone has a different playstyle. So these builds best fit my playstyle. I'll go over what I consider the easiest build and the hardest build. And fair warning, there will be some repetitiveness in perks and add-ons since they worked so well with Trapper's power. So let's go ahead and jump into the first build, which is more favorited for those individuals that have no experience as killer or as simply the Trapper. I would consider this playstyle more relaxed and chill, since the idea is to hook the survivor in the basement to lure other survivors to unhook their fellow survivor and then trap them up so they're stuck down there together, also known as Basement Trapper. I do want to warn you before you play with this build that it is mostly frowned upon in the DBD community. The build involves the following perks: Iron Grasp, Agitation, Corrupt Intervention, and Scorch Hook Monstrous Shrine. 3 out of 4 of these perks you should be able to learn throughout Trapper's Blood Web without buying any additional characters or perks. The first goal with this build is to down a survivor near or close to the killer basement. Then once you do, you should be able to easily make it to the killer basement with the power of Iron Grasp and Agitation. What those two do together is to ensure the ability to carry the survivor for a longer distance. Then once you are able to hook the survivor in the basement, Scorch Hook Monstrous Shrine activates. What this perk does is grant you 20% faster entity progression of a hooked survivor. That is, if you're not within 24 meters of that hooked survivor. This creates pressure for the survivors to go for the unhook. Monstrous Shrine also works effectively against a Swift. For those that don't know what that is a survive with friends, mostly when survivors are playing together on a Discord call or some other form of communication. What Corrupt Intervention does is it grants you the ability to set up Killer Shack if you have not downed a survivor. Then once you have your survivor hooked in the killer basement, what you'd want to do now is spend time setting up traps alongside the entries of the Killer Shack. Biggest recommendation I have for any new trappers is to not place the trap in the center of a pallet. For the add-ons that we'll be using for this build is Secondary Coil, which increases the time to disarm the bear traps by 50%, and the Makeshift Wrap, which allows you to walk over your own traps. I do have to say, even though this build is mostly frowned upon in the DBD community, it is my most successful build. The reason why I believe it is because a lot of survivors in Dead by Daylight play with their friends. With that being stated, let's go ahead and move towards the next build. This build is more recommended for individuals that have some experience with Trapper or just simply playing as killer. The goal of this build is to more focus on chasing and hooking survivors, not much gen defense. When you first load into the match with this build, I highly recommend to find the gates and put traps by the switches to ensure a plan B effect if chasing the survivors don't go so well. The reason why we don't want to focus on gen defense is because the perks alongside this build will do that for us. And what that build consists of is Corrupt Intervention, Deadlock, No One Escapes Death, or also known as No Ed, and No Way Out. Unfortunately, with this build, it does require you to get at least additional killers or perks, because only one of the perks is learned through Trapper's Blood Web. The only perk that you'll be able to learn through Trapper's Blood Web without any additional characters or perks is No Ed. A lot of individuals in the DBD community also frowned upon this perk because they feel like it's a crutch perk, which in my experience with Trapper, he does need the crutch to be able to assure at least a 3+ kill. Another thing with this build, your mindset is to not tunnel survivors out of the game. You want to hook at least every survivor once to ensure a full 4 stack for No Way Out. How No Way Out works is once the last generator is popped and a survivor interacts with the gate, it gets blocked by the entity for a few seconds. Depending on the tier and how many hooked survivors you have in that match, depends on how long No Way Out lasts. For tier 3, you would gain 12 seconds per token for each survivor that's hooked. The starting point of No Way Out is 12 seconds. So even if you don't hook a single survivor, you still have a little hope to get the exit gates blocked. Another thing I would recommend with this build is as soon as the last generator pops, I would recommend locating your No Ed and putting a trap right in front of it. Now with the perks discussed, let's go ahead and move on towards the add-ons that I would recommend with this build. The first one being Coffee Grounds. What this does is it gives you a 5-second haste effect or speed bonus after placing a trap. The secondary add-on is Secondary Coil. I do want to say that this build is a bit tough for less experienced individuals that have not played Killer. The last build that I would recommend if you ever do want to try out Trapper is a little bit more aggressive than the 2 previous builds mentioned. With the last build, this build's primary focus is chasing survivors and not much generator focus. I do have to say that I did lose matches more with this build than the 2 previous builds, and the major focus I believe on why it wasn't also very successful is because survivors were able to outrun me with Trapper being an M1 killer. The following build is Barbecued and Chili, Lethal Pursuer, Scorch Hook Pain Resident, and Deadlock. With all of these perks, none of these are learned by Trapper themselves. You will have to buy either the killer themselves or the perks whenever they're on the shrine. The major reason why I picked these perks for Trapper is solely because of the add-ons. So we're going to be talking about the add-ons first before we talk about the perks. The first add-on is Trapper's Sack. What this does is it assures you to carry all of your traps. Big worry on this one is once you place the traps, you cannot pick them back up. So be very mindful of when and where you place the traps. Since we can't pick up the traps, this secondary add-on helps us release some of that stress. And the second add-on is Iridescent Stone. What Iridescent Stone does is randomly open a closed trap every 30 seconds. The idea behind these 2 add-ons is just to place traps and not worry about them. Let survivors run into them, and then if they don't, just keep on chasing survivors. Now that we discussed the add-ons, let's go ahead and talk about the perks. The big focus is Lethal Pursuer and Scorch Hook Pain Resident. What Lethal Pursuer does is it grants you 9 seconds to be able to locate the survivors in the beginning of the match. Its second effect is that it gives an additional 2 seconds of any aura reading perk, which is why we're running Barbecue and Chili. Another focus on this build is Scorch Hook Pain Residents. Once you down a survivor, you want to be able to hook them on one of these hooks. To identify which is different from a scorch hook and a normal hook is that it'll be glowing or basically shiny. Deadlock is very strong by itself in a sense, I believe, because it helps lessen the likelihood of being gen rushed. The big focus with the traps, I would say, since they're all with you, is just setting up. Placing them at windows. I would recommend also setting them at the switches at the doors, and then also anywhere where you believe is a very strong looping area like Killer Shack or pallets. To end this video off, I would like to make some suggestions towards reworking Trapper's power. The biggest thing with Trapper is he relies heavily on his add-ons to be efficient, which honestly makes him one of the weakest killers due to it. How his traps work now without any add-ons is that you have to go out of your way to get traps and set them up, where sometimes traps would be on a second floor or even on the other side of the map away from generators and survivors. What I think would help him a lot would be the ability to reload his traps like how Huntress does with her hatchets or Trickster with his knives. I would keep the max traps he can carry up to 2 without any add-ons and allowing him the same max traps being placed throughout the map being 8. I think what would also benefit the Trapper is instead of going out of his way to resetting the traps or picking up to move it elsewhere, is that once a survivor successfully escapes or disarms the trap, is that the trap would break and disappear like pallets do, which would allow him to reload and relocate that trap easily. I know this sounds like another killer that we currently have, but at this moment I'm not sure how else to make the Trapper a stronger killer, but if you do, please definitely let me know in the comment section below. If you made it this far into the video, please let me know what your thoughts are towards the Trapper. Should he get a rework or stay the same? How strong do you think he is? Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed this type of editing. Good luck out there in the fog, gamers. See you next time. Peace.